I think you have to change your name, Jeff, unless
Oh,
there's
yeah.
something you haven't told me.
Yeah, I'm in the process of doing it right now. I'm like, oh, I don't want that. Too much responsibility.
I like your background.
Oh, thank you.
That's not what I saw in the photo.
No? What'd you see in the
I,
photo?
I saw a white wall and you're sitting on the floor.
Oh, I am. Yeah, my mom doesn't really have a desk, and I wanted to. She has a small place, so I wanted because I wanted to stay out of the way. So I'm like, oh, I did last night. I did a town hall, and I just sat on a pillow, and my butt was hurting so much after 2 hours.
I bet.
And then this morning I was reading on the couch. I'm like, if I could only just have the couch. I'm like, wait, I can pull a couch cushion. So my bottom is happy now.
How was Ledge?
It was good. It was good. It was funny because I haven't looked at the slides since I sent them off. So I went through, and there were a couple of times where I'm like, oh, what was I planning on saying on this slide? But people seemed to enjoy it. We had over between 60 and 70, I think.
Good. Did you get any good questions?
Yeah. Just examples of like one asked, is DEI a part of advocacy? Which I said yes. And some questions on LCAP, because I talked about LCAP and people didn't know what LCAP was. So yeah. And then somebody asked about members on the board not profiting from PTA. What if they did it?
You want to make me a co-host, by the way? Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry. I thought I was going to, and then I had to rename myself because my name is much more important. But yeah, it went well. Michelle and Jennifer were in there, and had a couple of questions during the presentation, and then afterwards it was just stuff. But yeah, they posted links and everything. So yeah, how's it going for you? I think everything went actually really smoothly. Hopefully you're experiencing smoothness.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a rough start at first because Diane was supposed to share and do all of that. And for whatever reason, she couldn't. So the problem is I wasn't prepared. So I pulled mine up, which is easy enough. But then, of course, as you know, it pulls up, and now I don't have any of my notes in front of me.
Right.
So then I kind of like just roughed it through the first couple until I could bring my iPad up and bring up,
Right. Yeah, I know Diane in the Zoom, or like the other day when I was trying to get in on the phone, I get it. I think she just saw this random phone number, so she kept putting me in the waiting room. But I'm like, if you have a meeting ID with a password, you don't need to worry about Zoom bombing, because the odds that somebody's going to just whoever has that link, just let them in.
Okay, so we're stumbling around, right? And I just finally went, you guys, I said, just admit everybody. I don't care.
Right.
Yeah. I don't care if they paid or not. Just let them in. I don't have time for this. I mean, and Diane goes, you're right. I'm like, there you go.
Right. Yeah.
So we're just gonna say hi.
Exactly.
I'm gonna let you introduce the video of Kitty.
Right, and then we'll just take questions, and yeah, I have no problem. I'm good at making up stuff if I don't know the answer,
That's all I'm doing right now, because and
I'm fine saying I don't know. And
well, it'll fall to me next year, but I just need to.
Yeah.
I don't know any of this stuff. I mean, I really don't. I mean, it's supposed to be good for me to listen and pay attention.
Yeah, it's good for all of us to listen and pay attention. That's the key to DEI: listen and pay attention.
Sounds like it to me.
Yeah. So I will play the.
Should we let people in now?
The video of welcomeness. Yeah.
Okay. Well, should we let them in?
Yeah. Go ahead and do that.
Hi guys, we're gonna get started here shortly. No.
Right? Although we've made up 4 minutes on our time estimate somehow. This might put us back there. Did you guys know that you can do Instacart for Sam's and Costco and not have to have?
Thank you, Aaron.
I did that.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. I know this is rude, but I'm going to kind of keep eating a little bit. I didn't get enough time.
Oh, please. Yeah, no.
I do wish we had a little music going on.
I know. I thought the music came with the video, but it was Amy's doing it. I'm like,
No, that was Wendy Harville did the music at the other
okay, at the opening
awesome.
one.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I kept playing the video. I'm like, what's wrong? There's no audio. And then I realized it was just separate.
No, it's just being recorded.
Yep, all classes are being recorded. If you could please put your selves on mute, that'd be awesome. And we will be getting started here shortly. Realize I should have muted as I tripped over my dog.
But that's the entertainment.
Yeah, had you seen it, it would have been.
So is it really hot down there? It looks. I'm coming down.
Down there. I love how
down there.
Oh,
down where you people are.
Where you people are.
I've got the nice ocean breeze.
Ocean.
Yeah.
It's warming up.
Yeah,
I hear it's going to get to like in the hundreds by Tuesday.
I got a warning that said 109. I'm seriously nervous.
I was supposed to go bike packing up in the Angeles National Forest on Friday, and I am not. Yeah, it would have turned out to be 3 days of just misery.
I want you to live. I want you to be around much longer.
How can I be a thorn in somebody's side if I'm not around?
Can't help it. That counsel, if you're.
That was awesome.
You're excused. Okay. We're going to be continuing to let people into the room, but it's 12:30. We want to respect your time, so we're going to get started. If you could please mute yourself, that would be awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Sandy Russell. I'm the current Vice President of Leadership, but next term, starting in 18 days, I get to be the Vice President of Health and Community Concerns, and I'm so excited about that. With me today is Jeff Albert, who is our Vice President of Legislation. And we're just so glad that everybody's coming and really, getting into this incredible, important topic with us today on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Kitty Cahalan is the current First District Vice President of Health and Community Concerns, and she was gracious enough to do a presentation for us that Jeff is going to bring up and show all of you. Then at the end of that, then we're going to take some questions. So If in the meantime, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation, and we will be with you shortly to get into some good conversation.
Right, here we go.
I'm not hearing her, Jeff.
Let me reshare that and make sure I click the checkbox that says computer
says-
down.
It says audio.
Yes, I had it. I had just assumed it had rolled over, but apologies. Let's go to it.
Hi, I'm Kitty Cahalan,
Better?
and I am the First District VP of Community Concerns. And I'm going to give a little workshop today about diversity, equity, and inclusion, why it's important, and how you and your councils and units can do self-assessments to ensure that you are putting a lens on diversity, equity, and inclusion for your membership. So I'm going to start with sharing my screen here so you can see presentation, and we'll see if presenter mode works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. All right, so I've already announced myself and what we're doing here. Our takeaways for the workshop here are to understand what is meant by diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to understand why this work is important. And the first, or maybe you're already doing this work, so maybe some next steps to take towards good DEI practices as a PTA. And our sources are National PTA has just redone their DEI toolkit this past year, and CAPTA has also been working on lots of DEI material. So all of this is common language that we're sharing with other PTAs about what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like, and what considerations to be using as you work towards this these practices. So why is this work important? National PTA considers diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority. And so we want you to consider this recent position statement on institutional racism. And that position statement's title is Say Their Names, Addressing Systemic or Institutional Racism. It was adopted in July of 2020. And the quote is, National PTA believes that it is our duty to disrupt the systems that propagate institutional racism. We call upon our PTA members to listen, educate, and advocate to demand meaningful change to end institutional racism. Our efforts must be intentional, purposeful, and relentless until every individual enjoys the freedoms guaranteed to all Americans. So PTA has a great role to play in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're going to talk about what that looks like. First of all, what do they mean by listen? And their direct quote, National PTA and its constituent associations will hold courageous conversations with our membership and communities to understand the impact of institutional racism and how it affects the well-being of children of color. So a lot of these materials are related to racial equity, but we want to put a lens on other kinds of equity as well. So racial equity is extremely important, but we also need to be thinking about other kinds of diversity within our communities. So we will be talking about that in a little bit. So these are specifically talking about communities of color, but you can think about these same practices listening to the LGBTQ community, people with disabilities, and all kinds of other minorities or people who are minoritized in their communities and therefore put at a disadvantage because we don't consider them as we practice our ways of being. Second, what is meant by educate? National PTA and its constituent associations must educate themselves and their communities on the disparities among students of color compared to their white peers related to issues such as housing, healthcare, environmental and community planning, criminal justice, and employment. Finally, what do they mean by advocate? Local advocacy should focus on issues such as disparate discipline, equitable education for immigrant children, recruitment and retention of Black and Brown teachers, housing development policies, access to healthcare, juvenile and criminal justice, and other issues which are relevant to local schools, communities, and states. So that's what they mean by those three terms. Why is this work important? Another recent National PTA position statement on inclusive curricula stated, and this title of this one was Inclusive Curricula in K-12 Education, adopted in September 2020. National PTA supports and advocates for inclusive K-12 curricula and multicultural resources and materials to empower students and families of all backgrounds to understand themselves more effectively in relation to others. Classrooms that celebrate diverse histories and cultures break down existing barriers and create supportive and inclusive schools that encourage students to grow and learn in the safest and most empowering spaces possible. So this is really about making sure that kids are supported, that they feel heard and seen, and that their different life challenges are recognized and addressed. And only in situations like that can we ensure that students are going to grow because they are made a full member of the community. And obviously that means including their parents, their families, and their communities as well. So we have positive outcomes with inclusive curricula. Inclusive K-12 curricula have been shown to lead to these positive educational benefits, including achievement of higher test scores. So inclusive schools have all kids achieving higher test scores, not just the ones with the advantages. Decreased truancy rates, exhibited higher self-esteem, which we all know has important implications for mental health, as well as better academic outcomes, and increased graduation rates, creating greater post-secondary opportunities for all students. So we are really helping students for life by making sure that they are included in all ways in their school lives. So what do we mean by diversity? Diversity is a representation of and respect for people from different backgrounds and identities, including but not limited to, this is where I get to the other kinds of diversity, race, culture, religion, socioeconomic status, age, geographic area, sexual orientation and gender identity, language, native language, you know, so if not everybody's speaking the same languages at home as everybody else, learning style and physical appearance. To embody and live these values, PTAs must actively recruit and elect a team of leaders who represent the school community you serve. So your PTA should be a microcosm of your entire community. And your PTA leadership should be a microcosm of your PTA membership. Support the units from less represented or resourced areas, backgrounds, and perspectives. So for you council leaders, you want to make sure that if you have a diversity of units in your district, some more affluent and some less affluent, or some with the greater racial or other kinds of diversity, that you are supporting them as much as the units that are more advantaged. So what are the dimensions of diversity and how do we quantify? So there are different dimensions, as we said in the previous one, racial, gender, LGBTQIA+, and it's Pride Month, so obviously we're putting a lens on that, and a lot of that in the media. So be thinking about what that means in your community, whether that's children who are transgender or non-binary, or children who are identifying as other than cis-het. And their families who are as well. So, so be sure to be inclusive of all those families. Language, religion, disability, economic level, education level, housing status, employment status, all of these are ways that families can feel less than and feel like they are not included because of where they are economically or their backgrounds. There are a lot of sources for some of these demographic data bits. So you can look up on EdData is one great place. You can look up school and district race or ethnicity, socioeconomic levels, English language learners, and foster youth. And that is something really important to do both in your council and in your units, to be ensuring that you really know who your school is. Because if your PTA is all one or two races, but your school is actually has children from many races, it's good to start thinking about how are you communicating the value of PTA, and what are these other groups not seeing that that you see, and how can you come together to be supportive of all of the students at the school. Kids Data is another resource that you can go to. It has data on special ed at school and districts and physical health status. And so that's another way to maybe take the survey for your school about who has to look at sort of the demographics of your school in terms of special ed or disabilities. You can also look at district websites. Some of them have DEI efforts, and they will have websites that share the data there, or you can do surveys. My cautionary note with surveys is if you're asking for very personal information, be cautious. People may not want to share that. People may want to know how to secure that. So think about anonymizing surveys, or how to do surveys in ways that are sensitive to information that people want to share. What is equity and how do we reach it? That's the big question. Equity provides fairness in resources, opportunities, and outcomes so that all communities get what they need to be engaged and successful. It moves beyond equal to recognize and address bias and privilege. So we have to recognize that not everybody started at the same place as everybody else, and understand and attend to specific individual and community needs, providing additional resources to those with greater needs. So we say we speak for all children, but not all children need the exact same thing, and some kids need more than other kids. And so we as PTAs need to acknowledge that and commit to helping kids in where they are. To embody and live this, PTAs must prioritize and advocate for innovative, sustainable solutions that work for a diverse range of children and families, especially those underrepresented and or marginalized in our communities, and persist in the face of challenges and hold ourselves and our partners, including educators and policymakers, accountable. So this isn't just about looking at who is in our PTAs and who our kids are. It's about turning around and saying, hey, school district, this is inequitable for these kids. We see this problem that isn't being addressed. It's about going to your state or national lawmakers and telling them what's inequitable. That is our voice as PTA members, and it's valued and important. And that is what we should be doing. So you're looking inward at your school and at your PTA, and you're looking outward to the people who can make those changes if that's not you. What is inclusion and how do we do it? Inclusion is actions, behaviors, and social norms that ensure all people feel they're safe, welcomed, and that they belong. This means putting diversity into action with skill and intentionality to ensure everyone feels respected, supported, and valued, and can fully participate with equal voice and right to be heard. This includes actively seeking out voices that have been traditionally underrepresented and or marginalized. This means tending to power dynamics where they occur and setting up a level playing field for all to engage in our work. So just like I say, if you need to turn around and tell your state legislators or your governor or your national legislators, that's what we have to do to do better for our kids. To embody and live this value, PTAs must engage a diverse range of voices. So not just your board and not just a certain section of your PTA or your school. A diverse range of voices and lived experiences from members and prospective members, and seek to meet individuals and communities where they are, especially those currently or traditionally underrepresented and or marginalized in our association. Solicit stakeholder input, incorporate it in visible and meaningful ways, and share credit. So I think that speaks for itself, and we want to make sure that everybody who has a voice in this is given recognition for their part in helping improve things. Account for cultural status and power dynamics in our many relationships. So National PTA has leader guides, and I have this in a folder that there's a link at the end, a tiny URL, so you don't have to like sit there and freeze the screen and look for it. So it should be pretty straightforward to find. And what they have are they have 4 different considerations, and we'll go through those. And for each consideration, one of those considerations is membership. So looking at your membership and making sure that your membership reflects your school and your community. And so for each of those, they have a rubric. What does it look like if we were at the beginning of our diversity, equity, and inclusion work? What does it look like if we're emerging, if we're thinking about diversity, but we're not diverse yet? We're focused on inclusion and diversity, but we are still have some of the equity to go. And then advanced, you're focused on equity as well, and you're really actually making it so that that children's needs are being met. So these are the different considerations. Membership is the first one. Who's in your PTA? So who's in your PTA versus who's at your school or in your school district? Does your PTA really look like your full school enrollment? And so in order to look at that, you can look at the demographic tools that we gave a few slides ago and start that. Communicate the value of PTA. So that means doing it in the languages that are spoken by the families at your school or in your council, and using variety of communication tools and methods. So not everybody has easy access to the internet. Maybe they have access to phone, or do you do text blasts? Do you do have a website? So think about how your district communicates. If your district has decent communication tools, you can mirror that and use the variety of tools that times like this. Now that we're starting to get back together, having in-person work, that might be easier. You might be able to have paper copies or signs at schools that people actually see that they haven't seen in a year and a half. That'll be nice. Being inviting. So that's literally inviting people, walking up to people you don't know on the blacktop, or, at meetings, or, orientation, beginning of the year, walking over to people you don't know. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm the president of the PTA. I'm the membership chair of the PTA, whatever. We would love to have you join. Do you know about PTA? Tell me about your kids. Are you new? Are you excited? And just being inviting to people, that means everything to people, that to be included in that way, seeing them, acknowledging them, and inviting to be part of the community. Being accessible, so making sure that your meeting times are at times that people can make. That might mean switching meeting times around to different times than you have them. Maybe mornings, some evenings. Maybe that means having some Zoom meetings and some in-person meetings during the year, now that we're more Zoom friendly, and having topics that meet needs. So having programs that draw people there and address things that they want to know about. For example, I'm president of my kids' high school PTA, and we have college readiness. These are things that parents want to know about. So things like that. But survey people, ask what they want to know about, and find those presenters. Finally, being intentional. That means making sure that you're doing that. Not like, oh, it'd be nice to have more people, we have a large English language community, but they're not in PTA. It'd be nice to have them. No, be intentional. State explicitly that you're welcoming of all these different types of people, and then make efforts to show it. Having your meetings in physically accessible places. Do you have translators? Do you have childcare? And if the meetings in the evening, is there food? I remember when I was, when my kids were in elementary school and I worked full time and I had a long commute, I'd be coming home, and I couldn't go to PTA meetings because it was that or make dinner. And so when I became president there, we started serving dinner, because then people could go from work there, bring their kids could have spaghetti dinner or pizza, and that made it more inclusive for me. And so I figured it made it more inclusive for other people, and it turned out it did. We really increased our membership that way. So budget some money for hospitality and serve dinner. If it's online, is it a platform people have access to? So these are all considerations to ensure that you are actually including people, not just wishing more people would feel included. Programs is another consideration. So we just had our membership and now we're on to programs. To whom are you speaking? Are your programs speaking to your entire community? Now that doesn't mean like every single program has to speak to everyone at every time, but overall, are you including all the community in the programs that you have? Are you acknowledging and celebrating the particular diversity of your community? Are you making programs accessible to the people that you want to reach? Meaning, you know, if you're trying to reach English language learners and their families who, you know, aren't necessarily fluent in English, are you making sure that you have a translator for the language they do speak? Are you seeking input from all elements of your community on what programs you commit time and resources to? So are you just doing what your PTA has always done, but maybe it doesn't meet the needs of the community anymore? Or are you making sure that everybody in your community's needs are being met with the programs that you're offering? If your demographics have been changing, maybe you have a magnet program at your school, or maybe your neighborhood has been changing. Are those demographics bringing new needs to the school community? And are you reevaluating the relevance of the programs as you do? So some programs may not last forever. They may not be relevant to the community you have now, you know, compared to the one that you had when that program started years ago. Governance. That is the next consideration for your DEI lens. Who is leading your PTA? Is your PTA board reflective of your membership? Is your membership reflective of your community? If your membership is reflective of your community, but then your board only has a certain element of your overall community, then you're not necessarily hearing those voices in the part of the PTA that makes a lot of the important decisions. So make sure that your nominating committee puts as a priority having a board that's as diverse as your membership, and your membership committee should be prioritizing your membership being as diverse as your community. How do you identify new leadership candidates? Do you ask teachers and administration for people who may not be on your radar? So asking them, like, who do you know that we don't know and that we're not seeing at our meetings or bringing into PTA? Do you have supports in place to mentor newer parents and families who may develop into good leaders? So there may be those kinder parents or those 6th grade parents who are on fire, but they don't know who to go to get more involved. And so, and do you have committees in your standing rules that serve as good training ground for higher offices? So if you have a certain role, maybe communications, that's a great way to get involved in the higher level, because you have to know what's going on to communicate that. And then once you know what goes on, then maybe you're ready to take on higher leadership. So think about what are the good training ground, bring newer people into those, and then train them up to be sort of, you know, the more challenging leadership positions later on. Do you have roles set aside for people who don't have time for a larger commitment, because they may still want to be involved? They may not be able to be on the board, but maybe they can chair one event or something that they can do from home or from their office. And so make sure that that instead of like clinging to all of the work for all the people who are sort of your workhorses, you kind of spread it around, because that can help your PTA sustain through the years, and it can sustain the diversity efforts that you're putting in. If you're bringing those people in now, then they'll turn around and bring more people like that in when they're at the leadership position. Have your officers thought about the roles their positions play in making your PTA more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? Example of that is when I was a council treasurer, I found that that there were people who would go to the banks to try to get their bank accounts into the new names, and we found that certain kinds of people had no problems at the bank, and other people were given a lot of trouble at the bank. Maybe if they didn't have the English language skills, or you know, unfortunately, a lot of the Black and Latino PTA leaders I would try to help tended to have some more trouble at the bank, trying to get the bank to turn it over, even when they had all their paperwork in line. And so PTA treasurers who can help with those problems who recognize that those are problems are going to be more ready and prepared to help those units actually when those very important processes are happening. So different roles in your PTA leadership have different touch points with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's a really good idea to sort of do an audit through all of the activities that you do and how they might be improved in your leadership by taking DEI into account. Finally, your advocacy. Whom are you speaking for? When your group asks your principal, your superintendent, your state legislators for something, is it for the benefit of the entire community or is it for a specific group? And there may be nothing wrong for asking for something for a specific group. If it's related to something with a disability, you're obviously probably not all the kids at your school are disabled, but you know, you need to be making sure that that when you are asking for them, you have, that's the second point, the buy-in or advocacy from this group. So if you're speaking for them, are you asking for the things that they say they need and in the ways that they need it? Have you made full efforts to fully understand their issues and needs? And are members of that group part of your advocacy effort? That's really important, is making sure that they are, you know, at the front of the charge, and then you're offering support for that. And if it's something that affects the entire community, do you have broad support from the community for this advocacy work? So, so sometimes people come in with their own soapboxes, their own passions. If this doesn't match what the rest of the community needs, you know, it's fine to advocate for those things, but you need to make sure that you are listening about what other needs might be, maybe rather than focusing all your energy on a limited set of problems. So first district DEI self-reflection exercise. We did this, our first district board did this. We began, I sent out a survey, Google survey, and it began with the explicit statement that there are no wrong answers in this exercise. So whatever you say is part of your self-reflection here as you think about doing better DEI work, improving in your DEI work. Participants were asked to give their definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion and say what relevance they have in their PTA work. They were then instructed to read the National PTA DEI guidance documents, which you have a link to. And then they were then asked if their definitions of DEI or their thoughts about it had changed once they had read that documentation. And if it didn't, that's fine. Some people already have sort of a fairly a version of DEI in their minds that's already pretty synced up with what PTA is saying, but sometimes that can change a little bit. Like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. So, and then I asked the participants to share what role their PTA positions have to play in increasing DEI in First District and what best practices they have found need to be employed. So that's where I say you look at your specific role and say, what role does mine have? If it's a communication, it might be about, like, you know, language or accessibility. If it's treasurer, it might be some of the things they said before. So what does your role have to do? If it's membership, obviously it's about knowing who your community is, and then making sure that you are communicating the value of PTA to the different audiences. So we did that. We found that it was a very useful exercise and got us thinking about our new roles as we move into our new roles in this over the summer. Some of us are staying, some of us are leaving, but we're thinking about starting our new roles with this DEI lens in mind. So common themes in our reflection exercise as board members from First District, we realized the responsibilities on us to gain cultural knowledge about our councils and units so that we understand your needs and can help head off problems. And this is one of those things that we're doing to help to help do that. And so, you know, it's not everybody's responsibility to educate us. We need to go out and say, who is our community and how can we help them so that we can be, you know, so people aren't having to waste time explaining themselves to us. Language and technological and financial barriers can limit ability to communicate and conduct business, and societal biases can create problems for certain members in practical matters, such as when changing over bank accounts. So that was one that actually came up, and I had that experience myself, but other people had noticed that as well. Our people in the financial positions had also had those experiences. above barriers going unaddressed over time can erode trust with unit and council leaders who may feel that they don't have the support they need. I don't know what I meant by above barriers there, but when barriers go unaddressed, people stop trusting. They just say, you know, they're not really here for us. And so we need to make sure that we are communicating. That's the part about intentionality, not just I'm doing this, but then actually doing it and then communicating that you're doing it and showing your improvement as you go. So inclusive practices, examples, introduce yourself at meetings with your pronouns. That's a good way to be inclusive to people with communities with gender diversity, and have your pronouns as part of your Zoom name. You can start each meeting with a territory acknowledgement. You know, if you have people from far and wide, they may not all live on land from the Tongva tribe, as we do here in the San Gabriel Valley, but you could say, like, we acknowledge that our land is historically part of the Tongva tribe, or, you know, there's a lot of good places that have good language for that. Just a funny aside from that, I found my grandfather's 1925 high school yearbook had a territory acknowledgement in it. He grew up in Missoula, Montana, and it had an acknowledgement of the local tribes. So this is not something new, and it's something that I think is really valuable to think about the history of our area and the impacts on the communities as new people have come in. You can host celebrations of specific groups in your community with their buy-in and the participation of members in that group. So if you want to have a Latin Heritage Pride, or African-American, Black American celebrations, Asian American celebrations, we have months for this too, where, you know, it's month of Asian American Pacific Islander. And if you want to celebrate that, please just make sure that you have the buy-in and participation of those groups so that you're doing it in culturally sensitive ways. These are some self-assessment questions. I'm not going to read every single one of these, but at the end is a link to this presentation, so you can look through these questions yourself. It's just other questions that you can ask yourself. Diane actually found these in some resource she found online, and I thought they were wonderful. And so I wrote them all down, but it really just asks you to think about all of the different ways that that people are coming to your schools from lived realities that you may want to think about, and how can you help meet their needs. These are the resources. This is the tiny URL. You might want to scribble this down real quick. I'll give you a minute. Because that is where we have this presentation, sorry, this PowerPoint slide, and then the national PTA documents. And that is the end of the presentation. And now I hand it over to Jeff and Sandy, who are going to do a Q&A. Thank you. Hi, I'm Kitty Cahalan, and I am the First District VP of Community.
Thanks, Jeff. So we want to thank Kitty for her efforts. She is out of town with family at the moment and couldn't be here for the Q&A part of it, but we're so grateful that she was able to help us out with that great slideshow presentation. Jeff is clicking out, I believe.
Yeah, my Zoom screen is frozen. I may have to close
And come back in.
And come back in. That's what.
Okay. So while he's doing that, so what we're going to do now is open it up for questions. You can either put a question in the chat, or use the icon for raising your hand, and we'll call on you. And that would be amazing. So give us 1 second while I see if we get the full screen back. Hang on. No. Cool. That's what I want. Sorry, just having to check on that. So Jeff's screen has frozen. Jeff, are you still there? Aha.
Yes, I just came back in. So
Lovely, lovely.
let me see if I can stop screen share. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
That made me
Okay.
a little nervous there for a minute. But.
Yeah. All right. So, just moving forward really quick, will we have all the answers for you today? Maybe not. So what we'll do is certainly take down, we'll have everybody's information who's in our class today, and we will be sharing what's known as an FAQ, question and answers for you that we will get back out to everybody, especially if we aren't able to get to all of your questions today. But I know we've got lots of time, and so we look forward to it. So let's start with Margarita. Would you like to unmute yourself? And
yeah, thank you so much, Sandy and Jeff, and to all your colleagues for providing this presentation. I had a question about how to include more men. I mean, our PTA has notoriously been driven by women, and I'm just really curious if you have strategies or suggestions on how to just invite more men into the space.
I have an answer, but I'm going to let Jeff go first. Jeff, why did you get involved?
My daughter's principal called me up and asked me to be president of the PTA. The reason I was not, I've always been a PTA member since she started elementary school, but and then that elementary school stopped having a PTA. But one of the main reasons was the meeting was at a time when I could not get home in time from work in order to attend the meetings. I wish I had a better answer, and Sandy may actually be able to answer this. The PTAs that I've been involved with have had a pretty high representation of men. Pasadena Council has for the last 10 years had quite a few men. In the PTA, I think the more men that see other men in PTA leadership roles, the easier it is to see yourself in that position. So my first year on the board, there was 3-4 other men on the board. And so, Sandy, do you have?
I do. I actually do.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a great question. And outreach is the best way. Number one, start, doing as Jeff is saying, maybe having some varied meeting times so that perhaps if people are working more in the daytime and you can have some nighttime meetings, you might be able to get people there. You heard Kitty earlier in the presentation talk about actually providing some food so that people, didn't feel they had to, do everything all at once. I know at our elementary school, we started doing things with dads by saying, hey, we're going to do donuts with dads, where they came in and we had donuts. And then we had them in the library with the classes reading to the kids. And I have to tell you, it's really special to have your dad in the room reading to the kids. It's just, the kids just pay that much more attention. It's something that if a person can get on their calendar, this is what my husband, very busy guy. He was, all over the map, and I would get on his calendar and I'd say, on this date from 8:30 to 9, you are at that school in the library reading. And he did it. And it just had to be on the calendar. It had to be put on there. And once he started doing that and having that exposure, he would come to all the events and help out. Outreach is critical to go to somebody and say, hey, we've got the fall carnival coming up. We need guys on Saturday to do the following. And most people say, I can give you Saturday morning. I'm on that. So sometimes what happens is PTA gets this reputation that you have to volunteer to be the president and the treasurer all the time, right? The job is too overwhelming. There's so much great work that can be done. And it doesn't mean that you have to be there every day. And that's what we have to communicate, that we need volunteers for very specific jobs, very specific times. It's totally doable. I loved recruiting dads to be the room parent. Again, it can be scheduled. If they can work it into their schedule and take the time away, and normally it's a half hour, maybe an hour at most, once a month, whatever their commitment can be. And once they can see that all of it's workable, they will participate. So I think that's the big key element, is to just make sure you're communicating it properly so they know what they're getting involved in and that it can be flexible. And once they do that, they tend to start seeing the exposure to the board and they go, oh, I can handle doing that, right? It just kind of keeps opening it up more and more, just like it does for any of the rest of us. So just providing opportunities, I think, and doing that direct outreach. I will also just say in my elementary school years, I was president, and we have a huge first day of school howdy coffee. Honestly, like 150 people would show up, moms and dads, everybody who was bringing their kids to school for the first day. They would come to this meeting, and I stood up there as a brand new president, and I said, well, I'm really sorry to tell everybody this, but I have to cancel the fall festival because no one stepped up to chair it, and I can't do that. We've got too much on our plate, so I hate it. I hate that we're not going to do it, but that's all I can do. And these two dads were sitting next to each other, stood up and said, we'll co-partner and we'll do it. It was awesome, right? And they got a lot of dads involved in the process as well. So I hope that helped answer some of your questions and gave you some ideas. So Marcus?
So one, I just want to respond to Margarita, and I was like, I think it's like everything else, particularly when you think about, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You have to be intentional about your recruitment. There is nothing wrong with saying, hey, listen, fathers, dads, we need you to be participatory in this process. It has happened historically more so with mothers than it has with fathers, but it's nothing wrong with being intentional. That's number one. Number two is, I think too frequently there are bad assumptions that are made. That fathers are, too busy, and you have to make some, modification to plans to plan around their own work. And again, I work as well. Again, my wife works as well. Those are bad assumptions. If we have the ability to do it and the time to do it, whether it be a mother or a father or a male caregiver or a female caregiver, I think we have the, you can do it. Again, and so one, I just want to think intentional outreach, intentional about recruitment, don't, take in those historic and in many cases bad assumptions. And then, like you said, I do think being intentional about, programming that supports and encourages, male participation. I think I think it's helpful to not only the school community, the PTA, but also the student as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much,
Thank
Marcus.
you.
That's great. Andy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, cool. So we've started a DEI committee on our local elementary school PTA. I'm a co-chair, and I just want to talk a little bit about our experience so far, and I'm looking both for advice but also just to find out if this resonates with other folks.
Awesome.
So there's two issues that have come up repeatedly over the past year. One is that we don't know what the deal is with our particular school yet, right? We don't have enough visibility into, are there systemic inequities that we should be worrying about, right? We know what kinds of things might be going on. We finally, at the very end of school, put out a survey, and we've got some responses, but they're not enough to really get the whole picture. And the flip side of this is that when there's things like the LCAP survey or just a how's distance learning going survey, demographics are not captured with those surveys. So there's no way to disaggregate and to see if there are systemic differences in the responses from students on gender lines or race lines or ethnicity lines. It's theoretically easily possible that girls have a different experience of Zoom meetings than boys, but how would we know that, right?
Yeah.
So that disaggregating outcomes so that we're not talking only about feeling like people belong and are welcome, but we know whether people are in fact succeeding differently on different dimensions. That would be awesome. And I don't. The second thing is there's this feeling, and I get the sense, especially from what Jeff has said in the last presentation on advocacy, that maybe the formal PTA position is different, but at our local school, there's a sense that the PTA needs to stay in its lane and like curriculum is not part of what we talk about. So we've had this ongoing discussion all year. Like, we are a group of parents who want to work on making the school more equitable and talking about curriculum reform and making the community better. And every single meeting, the issue comes up of, should we be a PTA committee? Or should we be just an outside group of parents? Like, are we more powerful or less powerful as a formal PTA committee? The hilarious thing is that while we still haven't figured this out, we somehow have gone from an ad hoc committee to a standing committee and have membership on the executive board now. But it remains the case that there's this difficult sort of personality issue of, like, if the administration thinks the PTA doesn't have input into curriculum, do we have that conversation, or do we just say, well, we're not the PTA, we're just parents, so now we get input, right? So I don't know if this is a common problem or not. So I'd love to hear if you've heard this before, or if it's unique to us, or what.
Yeah, I'm going to jump right in, and I'll let Jeff give his answer too. Well, first of all, our lane is advocacy on behalf of all children and their families. And that encompasses a whole lot, right? 124 years, we have been advocating, the world's largest and oldest advocacy group on behalf of children and their families. So our lane, that is our lane. And when you are communicating as a group of parents, and that is also what PTAs do at their unit and council, and hopefully the rest of us at a state and national level, communicating, providing information, rallying people around with that information, getting it out there. That is what we do. So one of the things at schools that people tend to join PTA is because we are the focal point of communication between parent families and the school. If you're doing some really good work and in your PTA meeting, you've always got your principal, maybe even your superintendent, who comes to your association meetings and does a presentation. They're part of that communication, part of that conduit. So I take offense, and I also I'll embrace it about what your lane is, because our lane is exactly what we're doing, which is communicating and advocating and doing all these other things. As an example, if you do have, let's take curriculum. Do we set curriculum? No, but we are aware of the curriculum and we can ask the questions about curriculum. We just passed a resolution at California State Convention about teaching the hard history of slavery. Awesome resolution. I encourage you to go check it out on our website and use it. Take it to your school board meetings and say, hey, PTA is talking about this. I'd like to know, as a parent, what is happening with our curriculum in regards to teaching slavery. What are we using? What are the books? What are our tools? What teaching programs are we giving support to our teachers, right? We open up those doors for that conversation as parents, but we're providing it from PTA perspective, if that makes sense. Jeff, do you want to add to that?
No, you covered that. But as far as, is it common? Yes, I see Scott Harden said that he's going through that right now. Also, as far as pushback, I do see it happening a lot with administration that is used to a certain PTA, sort of, let's say, for lack of a better word, the old style PTA, where it was more funding and fundraising, and principals sort of, wait, now you're advocating for something I thought you just sort of helped me out when I needed it. That is common. And so it's an education process, and educating not just potential members, current members, but also administration as to, it's not rebranding, because we've always been an advocacy organization, but sometimes at the unit level, the advocacy gets lost on the specifics. I mean, yes, we're raising money for a shade structure in the playground because it's important, but we are first and foremost, and that is, if you frame that as advocacy, which is shade because it's getting super hot apparently, then start framing things as advocating for children, and it is a process though, and some administrators can be really resistant, and we've seen not many but a few really just really uncomfortable battles between administration, always come at it from a position of respect. You are on the principal's campus. They do set the rules about the campus. So coming at it with respect and humility, but really trying to get them to see how you advocating for children is actually a benefit for that school, because you are a parent voice to the school district.
Right.
And so it can be uncomfortable, but try to make it less uncomfortable, and that you are here advocating for the children at the school. And
right. And I'd like to add in there as well that it's having that discussion with your principal, showing them what it is you can help provide from an advocacy standpoint. Find out if there's something particular like your school is struggling with, right? And hone in on the need of what's happening at your school, and look at your PTA resources. And, maybe have a guest speaker that helps out, that talks to parent. And of course, hopefully your teachers are coming to your PTA meetings. Maybe some of the teachers are part of a panel to discuss the issue that you want to bring up. You can facilitate those kinds of programs that says, hey, let's all be engaged on this issue, and here's how we do it. You kind of have to walk your talk and show them. As Jeff's saying, obviously you're on their campus as a guest, but we can show them that we're good partners and that we have a lot to contribute. And by the way, it's California law that the school districts have parent engagement. It's a legislation act. They have to have parent engagement. And one of the best ways they can do that is through the PTA. Your LCAP, which we're a big proponent of, and having engagement, having those conversations using your superintendent at your PTA meetings, et cetera, et cetera. That's one way of helping to do that. So we're going to go to some other questions. Marcus, I'm going to come back to you in 1 second because I see Angela's got a question, and then we'll come back to you.
Well, actually, first, sorry, Angela. Sorry, Andy. Lauren had asked a question in the chat.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Okay.
So, she had said that I'm in a small school district that has 4 PTA units in our council, and we're working pretty closely together. If we want to take some first steps towards implementing DEI practices, do you recommend we start that work at council level, or should units be doing that work, or should council and units together? I would say, especially on a small district, it really sort of depends on the players involved. You want it to be done well. I would say at the council level, you can pick people that are really committed from all 4 units, and then learn together and then bring that back to the unit. So council has a real strength there, because you're bringing leaders, rather than trying to do 4 separate programs, do one program that can help, a study that can help inform what's being done at the unit level. And hopefully at council level, you're incorporating people from all 4 units. I don't know if Sandy has anything to add to that.
No, you're absolutely right. Either's totally fine, but I do think it'll be much stronger, have more potential of success if the council is doing it, so that you have consistency, you have a buy-in. So I think at the council level, small or large, is a great place to start. So sorry. So we're going to do Angela, then Marcus.
Well, I was just going to add back to that prior conversation when you said that parent engagement is important. I've just come up against, though, that school sites are only seem to be interested in fulfilling the requirements of those parent engagement groups, such as ELAC, site council. And so even something simple as, can we put the PTA meeting dates on the important dates flyer that goes home to all the families at the beginning of the year? They're like, well, we don't have to do that because that's not in our checkoff list of complying with, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's just, that's been a struggle getting.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I know sometimes you get that, a lot of times it's that face-to-face with the superintendent even that just says, hey, we're really trying to make an impact here. This is a simple way to allow that to happen. And by the way, it's great parent engagement because they do need to continue with their LCAP reports, and they could put the different various things that they're doing. So you just kind of have to keep after it. I would even consider, if you know any of the Board of Education members, to engage with one of them. that just says, we're here, we're proud, we're
Yeah.
strong.
I think it's interesting though. I think in our district, they want to leave it up to the sites. There's never been a broad approach to like, this is how, things should happen. Because
Right.
one school site, they do let their PTA send home information over the summer.
Right.
Another one doesn't. And then you see the inequities. The school sites that don't have a lot of parent engagement are the ones that don't do those things.
Well, and that's actually an example you can share.
Yeah.
Share back with them and say, because I will say, presidents can be a little competitive.
Yeah.
And so you can say to them, hey, look over here at ABC Elementary. Do you see what they're doing? They got da-da-da-da-da. We can do that too, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I do think, Angie, since I know Scott, who's right next to you in the Zoom, is shaking his head as I was. We're all in the same district, which is very much checkbox and leave it up to the principal, good or bad. But you did bring up the equity thing, and now that equity, especially the equity lens, is very important, I think it's time to revisit it within superintendent over an equity issue, because the school that I was president of bent over backwards to make sure PTA stuff was included in everything, and other schools didn't have that, and it is a huge equity issue. So yeah.
All right, Marcus.
So, when my thought was about when you were talking about curriculum and, other issues at my particular unit, it has been said that, the PTA is not involved in politics. What I heard, and I believe the first session, is the PTA is actually not involved in non-commercial, non-sectarian, and non-partisan. And again, partisan being very different than, policy, right? And in terms of advocating for policy. So what I hear from you, Sandy, is, again, a unit, again, in line with a council, in line with a district, in line with a national, can advocate for policy, not necessarily for partisan. Again, very, very different from what I've heard before. I think most folks would understand the difference between the partisan and the policy, even though there's sometimes it can potentially get blurred into a point of I was like, can we advocate for vaccinations? Can we advocate for mask wearing? And, frankly, the answer was unknown, because I think some of our folks thought that lended itself towards being partisan versus lending itself towards being policy. And again, what I'm hearing from you is absolutely can advocate. I'm sure the district and the national would support that. Does that sound right or wrong?
Right. No, that's absolutely right. And the thing that we always have to be careful of is that whatever we are representing, it is within our purview. So with National California State PTA, we have to make sure that we have what we call the authority to speak on its behalf. So when it comes to legislative issues, which by the way, we have this phenomenal, huge team of volunteers at the state level who read over every bill that comes across, every single bill. And they look at it and they go, does this deal with children and families, number one? Yes, I will read it. No, goes over here, we can't even begin to take a position on it. Okay, if it does, then we're going to look at it. Now, they're going to read what the legislation is, and they're going to say, do we have a position statement already that helps us take a position on this? Are we willing to take a position statement, right? So there's all this really wonderful, detailed thoughtfulness that goes into how we stand. And if you go to the capta.org website or the pta.org website, which is nationals, and you look up resolutions or position statements, you're going to get a huge, long laundry list of what we have taken positions on. And if we have, you as a unit can take that and say, as a PTA, we stand for this. We represent this. Now, by the way, if you feel contrary to that position, you cannot go in as a PTA and say, we don't, right? Because you're representing the PTA. Anytime you're out there and you're touting PTA and I'm the PTA president, you're representing the PTA. So you have to make sure that that's what you've got. I'm going to let Jeff talk a little without getting into too much detail because it can go on forever, but talk about what it means to take a position, you know, at a local or council level and what the process is for that.
Yes, I had to check to see if I was on mute. Yeah, so the process is, as I mean, Sandy did lay it out pretty well, but it does involve looking to see first, does it pass the litmus test? Is this something that PTA should be involved in? We would not be involved in, like, let's say one thing that came up, the marijuana legalization in California. That's not something PTA could be involved in because that was specifically for adults, had nothing to do with children directly. I'm sure tangentially we could, you know, find. So that would be something that we couldn't do, but vaping is advertised towards children and accessibility. That would be something that PTA could take a position on. So first, is this something we should take a position on? Then you look to see, have they taken a position on? You mentioned vaccines. National PTA was actually instrumental in making sure that we're not talking COVID vaccines, but in general, the vaccines that all children have to have before they come to school, that was make sure that that was law, because it involved the health and well-being of children. So you look at that, how does that relate to what you're doing? And then you form a study committee that looks at not just the pros and cons of what you want to advocate for, but how does PTA stand on that? Then you present it to your association, whether it's council, unit, and then once that is adopted, yes, the unit says, yes, we are taking a strong position. Then you as PTA leaders can speak, saying that we at Willard Elementary School are speaking on behalf of this to the school board, to the city council, to our state legislators, and you have the combined voice of all of your membership. And you know, if you are going to do a position, please let First District know, because they can definitely help you through that process, and can also let you know, give you advice whether this is something that is a PTA issue, or if other units have already done it, maybe help you share information.
Yeah, and just to reemphasize a couple of quick things in regards to that advocacy, and Marcus, we are nonpartisan. We are about policy, for sure, about children and their families. You as PTA leaders, you know, be very cautious and careful about how you represent. I will say, as a PTA president, you know, if you're talking to the press or somebody else, and even if you go, well, you know, it's my personal opinion that we should get rid of so-and-so, I'm all for, and you start talking about your individual party preference or whatever, the next thing, quote in the paper, is Sandy Russell, PTA president of such and such, said. So please be very careful that you're representing the PTA position. I'll give kind of a silly one. You know, when the movie Prom came out and the whole PTA thing and how negative they were, National PTA actually sent out a message about that, what they, you know, and said, are you kidding me? You know, PTA is a proud supporter of the LGBTQ community. Are you kidding me? You know, how dare you represent us as this? And so we were all pretty upset about it, because it was you know, it wasn't true, you know. So anyway, that's just my little side note. Since I'm still looking to see if there's any questions, I'm going to just tell another little story that I thought was really a good one for me, for being inclusive and how you go about doing it. So I have a sister-in-law who lives up in the Chico-Orville area in Northern California, and they could not get a group of parents involved no matter what they did. It was a group of, I believe, from the Hmong population. And they tried what they thought was everything, outreach and, you know, going on and on. And so finally, someone had the wherewithal to walk up and really have a one-on-one conversation with one of the moms and said, you know, we're PTA, what can we do for you? Not join PTA, not, you know, you got to do this for me. They said, what can we do for you? And this lovely person said, well, our kids keep coming home and saying it's our turn to make cupcakes for the classroom, birthday party or whatever. We don't know what a cupcake is, let alone how to make one. She said, done. And she got a hold of the middle school, home ec room, and they brought everybody in who wanted to come, and they taught them how to bake cupcakes. And in that process, and that was all there was to it. They had this wonderful community event of them all just talking, getting to know each other, finding out about more what PTA is, and they went to them to provide to them. So sometimes you have to look at it from a different lens. What can we do for you? What would make you want to be with us? What is it you're looking for? What is missing from your school connection, right? So reach out and see what people need. Don't keep shoving something down their throat they have no business wanting, right? Same thing with your teachers, by the way. Don't force programs on your teachers they don't want. Make sure your teachers are part of the process. If they could care less about what you're providing, you're going to get less participation. It's a group effort. All right, Michelle?
I can see you okay? I have a question about at our school, we have a dual language program that's kind of, it's new, it just moved to the school. And so I was wondering if you or somebody could speak about when you have kind of different groups within the school, how to balance or make sure you're meeting the needs of all those different groups.
Jeff, you want me or you? Or?
Yeah, no. And I'll start. So yes, that is a definite challenge. We've had that in our school district too, and a lot, especially when a program, either an, as Kitty said, magnet program or a dual language program, brings in a totally different population. Especially I've seen where it really has a strong negative impact, where it brings in a more moneyed class, a group of people that have more social capital. They feel like their voice is heard, and even if they're well-meaning, can sort of run over the existing PTA structure at the school, parent structure at the school, and that can be really tough. And that is a situation where you really, hopefully the principal sees that you have these two different populations that may have different ideas of what parent engagement looks like, and can help navigate that, because it is really tricky. And but it's something that really needs to focus and make sure that the community that was there to begin with is given the authority of having been in that. It's very similar to gentrification. Are we coming in and we are now making the community look like what we think it should look like, and not bothering to look and see what the community was that we moved into? And that can be really tough, but it is encouraging the newcomers, let's say, for the new program, to take time to get to know the existing community and to find out how they can work with that existing community rather than setting up their new programs, even though they have a school program. I know it's not very specific. I'm sorry. It really does depend on.
I'll happy to get a little more specific about that, because we certainly have had a lot of dual immersion programs that came into our community as well. And really, really important is to establish that communication right away. And to the point of what you don't want happening is that, so let's say it's Japanese class that's speaking, and the Japanese kids only hang with the Japanese program, and there's no interaction with the rest of the school. And so that's just really sad. And so what you want to do is, and the principal really should be an integral part of this, but you as PTA can be too, where you get I'm just using Japanese as an example, the Japanese program and the parents there, and say, hey, let's have a night that you teach all of us at school about what's happening in this program, about how important the cultural aspect of this is, and then have another night where you do an entire cultural event in an international fair, right? Where we're exposed for everybody, including the kids in the program for the Japanese program, that we're seeing a much more diverse cultural program that's being presented. Dual immersion programs are amazing, and they had it when my son was starting in school. The biggest argument my husband and I would have had is what language, because they're just all so cool. But it can totally split a community. And you just right off the bat, you have to get everybody talking to each other. You have to say, don't separate it. How can we be together on this? PTA is one. We're for all of the kids. I hope that helps a little bit.
It does, yeah. And I'll just say that I'm totally new coming into this. Our principal at the school seems like super supportive, really aware of like equity and inclusion issues. So I'm really looking forward to working with her on that. I guess it's just like something that I'm going to keep in mind, because it's only the second year of having the dual language, and it's a Spanish program, and most of the school is like of Hispanic or Latinx origin. So kind of, it's not like the Japanese where maybe that'd be like really foreign to a lot of people, but I'm just noticing that as the PTA board from last year, their kids are like aging out or they're moving. Like my kids are in dual language, another parent, kids are in dual language, the new president is dual language. And so I'm just kind of like, I'm just gonna like keep an eye on this, and like you're saying, make sure that it's not, we're not creating like new programs that don't need to be there.
Right, and make sure that when you're doing these things that people are articulating what really concerns them, instead of sometimes people get upset and they start getting irritated about the things that aren't real, right? They're not really talking about the problems that are bothering them. And, hopefully your principal would be willing to facilitate that as well. And then I encourage your principal and your PTA leaders to reach out to schools in other districts who've been through this and what did they do? Because I know Glendale has a lot of dual immersion programs that have been in place for a long, long time, and as do other districts. So reach out and see what they've been doing to see their success stories. But good luck with that.
Yeah, well, and to address specifically, I saw Angie mentioned. So you're in Pasadena, not that it.
Yeah, yep, another Pasadena.
Okay. So yes, Altadena Arch had a similar issue, especially if you are a newcomer to the school, and especially coming to school that is primarily Latinx. I'd give the first episode of Nice White Parents a listen. It's quite uncomfortable, but it really does. That podcast, especially the first episode, really does, especially if you identify as like white middle class coming into a school that is of a different population. It's a good lesson on what not to do and how to approach a school community. So it's a great case study for all of us to listen to. But
Jeff, can you please put the name of the podcast in the chat?
Yes, I will find that. And the whole podcast is in, but the first one was almost painfully cringy about some of the stuff I've seen in years in PTA. And so
we're gonna go to Angie and then Nicole. Go ahead.
I just was going to add that, I think it was in this presentation, right, about being intentional when your nomination committee puts the board together. Like, it's fair to say that you're going to be 50-50, right? I don't know, or reflect the population of dual language and non-dual language on your board. Would that be appropriate? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. All right, Nicole.
Sorry, you hear noise. I'm also at a soccer game, as always, multitasking. I just want to say, so I also come from a school that has dual immersion. And I have to say, those are some of our best parent volunteers. I feel like they signed up to be in that specific program. And so they tend to be some of our more involved volunteers, which I love. Secondly, a thing that we're actually looking to do, because we have a similar kind of a large makeup of our school is Hispanic and Latinx. And we're actually looking through our DEI program is doing an all Spanish program. So a program that's done all in Spanish, spoken in Spanish, the writing and everything is Spanish, and actually have English interpreters, just because we want to kind of open our other families open to, like, this is what it's like for our Spanish speaking families that have to attend all these meetings that are English only. And I just thought it was a good way to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So our group is looking to do that this year. And I just thought I'd share.
That's awesome. Thank you, Nicole. That really is cool. I like that. Okay. Anybody else? I do know, as we wait and see if there's anybody else who wants to add any more or put in some questions. Moving forward into the new year, we're going to be hosting some more information sessions and dive into this deeper and find out what your needs are. And remember that First District is here for you. If you want us to come out and talk DEI or talk any particular program in general, we're certainly happy to do a presentation. If you want us to work with your board, that's what we're here for. We are all volunteers as well, but we're very passionate and care and want to help you in all ways that we possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And just keep in mind that the goal of DEI is not to have a more diverse board, but it's to create it is to create an environment where everybody feels they belong. So inclusion is a step towards that. It's the action towards it, but belonging is the end goal. If a student feels like they belong at school, if a parent feels like they belong, which means they have agency, that it feels like home, then that's the end goal. So whether that's a new family coming into the school feels like they belong, an existing family, or what could happen is sometimes as they bring new programs in and new families come in, and people that used to feel like they belong no longer feel like they belong because it's not the school they had before. And as we're looking towards diversity, you really need to consider why do we want a more diverse board? Is it to make our board better? Are we serving? So really you need to question each step. Is what is the intention of having a diverse board? Is it to make us feel better? My daughter's school, when I was president, it was she was one of 2 white kids in the class. I walked in, our entire board was white. And so we could diversify the board, but was it to make me feel more comfortable about being on a board that was representative, or was it to actually make sure that we had a board that really represented the school? So, what are our intentions in doing this? When asking, especially communities that have been marginalized, communities of color, are you asking to include them because you want, you need their help to make it more diverse board that's still doing something for you? Or what are you doing for these communities? The best way is to show through action, to insist that the school district has everything in English and Spanish. If you have a large Spanish population and they're not doing that, even if you may not have very few Latinx or Spanish speaking families as membership, but making that a priority to make sure that all families are getting communication. You really do it through your actions. And so, think about what your actions are as far as equitable actions, and listening is really important. And, it's these steps, and it's a process, and it really does asking a lot of yourself. What are your goals and what are your intentions, and being willing to apologize and just say, I misstep, I misspoke. I will educate myself better, and I will make sure I don't do that again. And once you're comfortable listening and feeling comfortable being wrong, but being humble about that as a PTA leader. I think that that's really some first steps. And I see in the chat that Scott had said that he wants to continue this conversation out. So if you haven't been looking in the chat, and I know some others said they'd like to participate, this is a conversation that we need to have and develop and change. It'd be great to continue this.
Yeah, so just moving forward into the new term, for health and community concerns, I'm going to be doing my hardest to try and have a monthly meeting in the evening about health and community concerns issues. Obviously, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a huge part of that. So I'll be looking for information on that, and I hope that you join me. And I'm hoping to form a committee that helps us decide how we can best impact our community. What can we do locally at your unit, your councils, and our district? How can we help each other out and make things as the best they can be?
And I saw one question from Scott way at the very beginning. Sorry, I just wanted to address. So he was asking about, state procedures and stuff like that, how that may impact, especially communities. And I've noticed that, the bylaws and a lot of the rules PTA have can be very foreign to non-Eurocentric families. And so he had asked whether, state was amenable to making changes. We need to let PTA know whenever there are rules and policies in place that are alienating or certain populations. Yeah, we need to let them know. Some of them may be tied in with federal tax code, but there may be workarounds. But that is definitely something. Never say that's just the way PTA is.
Please.
That's a great question. Let's go to first district. Let's go to state. Let's talk about that. More and more people are becoming more willing to listen. Yeah. So yeah, if for any of you, if we've noticed that there are anything that's intimidating or keeping certain populations away from participating, let us know. Because that if it's a racial, that is what systemic inequality is.
Right. Well, I think Sandy said, listen and hear, and how can units be more equitable? And that conversation, if we can have that conversation with state and national, that's it right there. That's
well, and if something is about, so appreciate, right, that each of you as an individual nonprofit, you're each your own little small business. It's a nonprofit business. And the beauty of PTA is that you've got this phenomenal support network, be it your council, district, state, national. You've got this huge support network that is there to answer your questions, to help you through things, to help you fight through the Attorney General's office if something's not happened in the past. And whatever the difficulty is, you've got us there to help you as best we can. But in some cases, some of this stuff is Attorney General, federal, IRS, whatever. But maybe what we can do, Scott, and I love how you're thinking, is find the right way to communicate and have an understanding of what that means. Maybe we're, we think we're being clear, and maybe we're not. Maybe there's some jargon in there that is just so foreign that people aren't going to get it no matter what we say. So I love what you're thinking there. And we should be looking at that sort of explanation in a cleaner, clearer way, for sure. Mona's saying something easy that could be done is to have a PTA representative at ELAC and DLAC meetings. This is what Burbank Council PTA is going to do. I love that. I think it's a great idea. Anytime you can have a PTA representative in any scenario situation is a plus. I know in Glendale, the council PTA president sits on the superintendent's board meeting with his staff prior to the school board of education meeting. And that's where you find out a lot of the information, and you share a lot of things, and you can have those conversations and questions, and you're that representative that's sitting there. So I think anytime you can sit in on a board is a really, really good thing. So that's a great one, Mona. Thank you.
It is. And any other parent, like in Pasadena, we have the African American Parent Council. I think showing up with just the intention of showing up and finding out how PTA can be a partner in that group's efforts really goes to show. It helps buy social capital. So rather than showing up to recruit. So yes, DLAC, ELAC meetings, especially if you're not a Spanish speaker and you put on the headphones for once and listen to the interpreter, it goes a long way to really show what, again, it's in showing your intentions, sharing your intentions.
Yeah. And by the way, and the other thing I will say to everybody is I'm hoping that all of the classes and sessions that you took today or have taken maybe even at state, that it doesn't stop with you today, that you come out of this with something to share. Even if it's sharing a link to a website, joining in on the podcast, just don't keep this information to yourself. You know, it's for everybody. We want to share. The best gift we can give to others is knowledge, is training, is, you know, sharing all of that information. And then when we come together, we can maybe change the world.
Speaking of which, are the slides from the recorded part of the presentation going to be available?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, they will be. They should be in the packet link. Sorry, I'm a little tired after doing this all day. The link that you got for all of the classes, there's a thing for handouts, and it should be in there.
Oh, okay, great.
And if it isn't, we'll make sure it does get there.
Yeah, I've just posted the shared drive, and it's there is a PDF of the PowerPoint in there, including other information that Kitty's collected. Really great resources in there. Including like the surveys she sent out and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
you know, the self-reflection tools.
We're wrapping up here. We've only got a couple minutes left. And I guess I encourage all of you to reach out, and hopefully I'll see some more of you again and in some future meetings, and we can talk about what great things we can bring to your units, councils. But we thank you for being here today. It was just amazing to have you all. Thank you for taking a Saturday away from your families in order to get trained and to be informed. You know, thank you. It's awesome. We so appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you, Sandy and Jeff. Appreciate it.
Welcome.